So earlier this morning, some news came out. The Packers have met with a running back. It came out here from Dane Brugler on Twitter, saying this: Kentucky running back Ray Davis has one of the best backstories in the draft class, but he is also a really talented back who will make an impact as an NFL rookie. Davis is in Green Bay today and then has more team visits scheduled with Denver, Atlanta, and Arizona. And when we look at the Packers and their current running back situation, things, of course, changed in a big way in the past month when free agency began, with Aaron Jones leaving, getting released, and signing with the Minnesota Vikings. The Packers making the decision to bring in Josh Jacobs on a 4-year, $48 million contract, and then deciding as well to bring back A.J. Dillon on a very cheap contract. So the Packers running back room already looks much different than it did when last season ended. And now when we look at the Packers in their backfield, I still think that even though they brought in Josh Jacobs, they also have an ability to get out of that contract after 1 year if they wanted, even 1 or 2 years. It's not too difficult for the Packers if things went south with Josh Jacobs, which I don't believe will happen, but there's not a ton of risk there with the guaranteed money and things like that the Packers gave to Jacobs after the first season. But with Jacobs there, with A.J. Dillon there, and also you have Emmanuel Wilson, I think that outside of Josh Jacobs, I'm not sure A.J. Dillon has 100% locked up the second running back job considering the value of his contract. And so when we look at a guy like Ray Davis, he is projected to be drafted around the 4th round. If you look at PFF, they have him ranked as the 102 prospect. I guess that would be round 4. And then NFL Draft Buzz has him as the 113th prospect. That's averaging lots of different sites. So I guess that would basically be the 4th round. That seems to be where people rank him. Of course, he could go earlier, could go later, depending on how the draft plays out. But I don't think it's that crazy to think the Packers, draft a running back in that range, which is why they're probably even interviewing and spending more time with Ray Davis, because clearly they, want to know more. This is one of those top 30 visits, and we've seen in years past, the Packers do bring in some of those guys that they do meet with, about 6 or 7 in some past years. Some being in the draft, some being in, being undrafted players. And so when we look at Ray Davis, he spent time in college from 2019 to 2020 with Temple, 2021 to 2022 with Vanderbilt, and then 2023 with Kentucky. And when we look at his stats in his past couple seasons, 2022, 12 games played, 1,044 yards, 4.5 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns. Also does a lot of work when it comes to receiving the ball out of the backfield. 29 receptions in 2022. Then when we look at 2023, 13 games played, ran for 1,131 yards, 5.7 yards a carry, 14 touchdowns, and then 32 receptions. So he was very dominant last year when it came to running the ball, catching passes out of the backfield. And here's what PFF has to say about him on their NFL draft big board. They say this: Davis is short, which affects his overall speed, but he has a great center of gravity in addition to nimble and balanced footwork. He also has a quick first step to accelerate and fantastic vision, especially when running behind a zone blocking scheme. As a third down back, he has good hands and brings that one-cut agility to routes out of the backfield when it comes to pass protection. He is a willing blocker who has good fundamentals but is often overpowered. And when we look at Davis and his height, according to PFF, they have him at 5'10", 216 pounds. But as I was looking at some different sites, some sites have him at 5'8". I'm not sure why that is. So there seems to be a slight disagreement there. If you look at Kentucky and their website, they have him at 5'10". So he's somewhere in that range, but around 5'10", 216 pounds. And then here's what PFF says to finish off. They say the bottom line: Davis might not have the build and long speed of a back drafted in the top 50, but his vision, feel for space / blocking, and one-cut ability make him an efficient ball carrier with good hands in the passing game. This should make him a mid-round selection and potential starter. And the thing is, with so many running backs, you can find starters later in the draft, just like Aaron Jones. And so Davis seems to have starter potential. And let me read this from an article I found from a quote from Davis and also his coach, what he had to say. So this is from Your Sports Edge, written by Larry Vout. It says here's a quote from Davis. Throughout my career, I've always been able to catch the ball and just kind of showcase that versatility with my hands and stuff, Davis said after his pro day workout. I want to come out here personally just to continue to grow as a running back, as a receiver, and be able to be a matchup nightmare for linebackers and safeties. Kentucky coach Mark Stoops thinks a NFL team will get a very good player with Davis. Stoops says here, they're going to get a guy that can play every down. You know he's a 3-down back, and you know a very tough, great teammate, great person. They're going to get a heck of a player, Stoops said. So his coach believes he can be a 3-down back. Yes, he was with Kentucky last season. And we know the Packers, they're not going to give Josh Jacobs 100% of the carries. In most teams around the NFL, the days of a back getting, the workhorse load, it's very few and far between these days. Lots of teams love to split the carries a lot more. Maybe not always 50-50, but they like to bring in other backs to, keep these backs healthy through the 17-game season. So that way, near the end of the season, these guys aren't beat down too much after getting a crazy amount of carries. And so we've heard the Packers say even this offseason that they still plan to, split carries in the backfield as they did in years past with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And as I was saying earlier, I think that if the Packers drafted a guy like Ray Davis, he would be competing for that second running back spot. I don't think A.J. Dillon or Emmanuel Wilson have that secured. Training camp obviously will be a big part of that to see who they believe can be that secondary back. We have heard Brian Gutekunst say that he wants to have a big physical back in the backfield when it comes to colder games. So you have that physical, power kind of back like an A.J. Dillon. And so maybe when it gets colder, even if a guy like Davis, let's say, beat out A.J. Dillon, Dillon would still probably get some carries there just with his physicality and his power. But I don't think that, drafting a back, they're going to get a chance to be that number 2 guy. And as we know, the number 2 guy in Green Bay gets a good amount of snaps because of their wanting to, split the backfield and keep their main guy healthy in this year, who will be Josh Jacobs. So interesting to see the Packers meeting with Davis. We'll see if they decide to draft him. He is, of course, meeting with lots of other teams, so it's not a given. But we'll see what the Packers decide to do when it comes to adding another running back. My guess is they at least draft a running back in this draft. I don't see them doing it early, like first or second round, because of their investment in Josh Jacobs. But I could see it, around 3-4 potentially. Maybe Davis fits that and gets selected by Green Bay. So that is it for today's video. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.